Well, thanks everyone for joining us today on another CyberWins podcast. I really appreciate your time and Gerard's time as well. Most of us see law and code as two different languages. My guest today happens to be fluent in both, and he translates between them to protect Australia's most critical systems. Gerard, I appreciate you coming on. Why don't you tell us a bit about who you are?
Thanks, Hayden. How you going?
Good.
Look, I got into law quite late in life, about 10 years ago. So, and it was just out of necessity, really. And I've been in IT for 25 years, doing all sorts of stuff, from network engineering, network architecture, to software development, application development. Worked for Microsoft for a few years, and then when the ability or the opportunity for me to come to do law, it seemed a very natural progression for both of it, because of where law and the cyber world meet is everywhere. But yet we sort of come down to the fundamentals of law, like, using the old laws to indict with the new laws. But it is really good to see that there are security suites that have been passed by government now that is beginning to address the fundamentals. Now, when I say fundamentals, hardware stuff, right? So.
Right.
The real fundamental of getting stuff from transactions from point A to point B. So my last 6 years have been mainly in the government space, and heavily heavily in the federal government space, contracting there.
Beautiful. Nice. Well, thanks very much. Now, we like to talk about CyberWins, naturally, if you saw the name of the podcast. A bit less doom and gloom than some other places online. But I'd love to know, and it could be something that you've experienced with work, or that you're seeing in the industry or elsewhere. But what's a cyber win that you've seen recently that you're particularly proud of?
I'm going to take the legal aspect of the
Sure.
legal side of this one. So late last year came into effect a cyber suite of laws, and what I'm really pleased with is that they are taking they being the government and our elected parliamentarians are taking a fundamental approach to the security of just general households, really. So it comes down to the security of our hardware. Unfortunately, it doesn't translate cars or phones or watches or things like that. Translate to routers, things that do a particular thing. So you've got a fridge that tells you something, right? It does a particular thing. Internet of Things, or let's just say, so it just does that one particular thing. So a router, a switch, those sorts of things that are starting to come in. Your Ring cameras, all of those sorts of things that are there to do a specific item will now, the manufacturers will now start to have to meet certain standards, security standards, which is good.
Yeah.
So I'm not personally taking the win, but I think that's a really good step for where we're heading. I know it's fundamental, and I know we haven't gone right into the AI space like Europe have or anything, but the fundamental hardware components is really, really important.
Yeah, baby steps, I guess. And I totally agree. That's really exciting. I've recently gotten a bit into hardware hacking, and not that I'm good at it or anything like that. I'm definitely not. But there's some YouTube channels that I follow. This American gent who he just buys pieces of hardware, routers, cameras, all that kind of fun stuff. Gets, a UART console on there, and it's just like, cool, there's the key that every single one of these devices use to talk to the mothership. Yep. And I can see everything. And wait, there's a feed for all of every single one of those cameras that's been deployed, and all that kind of stuff. And it's a scary thing. I'm glad that there's some regulations and stuff coming up. So
yeah. Look, I've got to say, my things is that
Yeah,
I buy that sort of technology as well. So
that's wonderful.
I'm a bit of a geek, so I can
Yeah,
buy watches and all those sorts of things just to try and do exactly the same.
yeah.
So
Get a rich
I've
shell
got a
on your
complete
watch or your kettle, and yeah,
yeah, I've
100%.
got a complete lab that just
Yeah, same.
yeah,
Yeah,
a
that's awesome.
total geek. Yeah.
Yeah. When I bought my radio oscilloscope for my desk at home, my missus was just like, this might be going too far. I'm like, it's nowhere near far enough, actually. Awesome.
I'm just waiting for my shed/office to be built so I can
Yeah,
set. I've got the whole thing, but I've got to pull everything
yeah,
out of its box, put it on,
yeah.
do my stuff, and then put it away again. So
Hardware stuff, NFC stuff, RFID stuff, I
yeah,
really love. I was one of the geeks who put the RFID/NFC chips in their hand. I've got three in here. Well,
get
actually
out.
four. One is a two-in-one. This one gets me in the elevator. This one's my business card and a few other bits and pieces. No, this one's my usually a hotel room key. This one is elevator and business card, and this one's like a separate one where instead of updating this chip, you update a web app, so you don't need to
Yeah,
reprogram it with a transmitter on your hand. You can reprogram it elsewhere and it points to a different spot. Anyway, we're getting so far off topic
yeah,
from
so far.
CyberWins, but that's awesome. Nice. Cool. So you spent a couple of decades as a technologist, amongst other things, and then you decided to become a lawyer. So could you take us through the specific moment or specific problem that you encountered that made you say, I've got to understand the law here. This is something that I want to pursue.
Uh, so I actually got into law by default, or actually by accident, and it was I had to design an application for one of the state governments with regards to state migration management. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So state-sponsored migration, a couple of law units in migration law, and liked it. And I continued on and finished my migration law studies, and then went in and did the Masters of Law Juris Doctor from at University of Canberra. So that's how I sort of got into it. Now, getting in and marrying, and I just loved. I actually love criminal law. I'm not a criminal lawyer, but I love
Yeah.
criminal law. I love, so everything I do from a certified ethical hacker is, sort of sniffing people out on the dark side of the planet. If I could use a Star Wars reference instead of a Star Trek.
Yeah,
Um,
approved.
so, um, so that's how I sort of got into it. Now, in terms of the legal side, it's really trying to make myself visible to be able to have some sort of influence. So with what I do at the moment, I'm on the Victorian LIV Technology Council, so I'm on their AI and their data council there with their committee. So that's the sort of thing that we're sort of looking at. Also, right into privacy as well, right? So you've got your technology and how that not encroaches, but how it affects your privacy. Because some can definitely affect your privacy, but yet others can't. So you're always going to have those bad actors that will do something because they can, regardless of whether or not they're big companies or they're just the individual hacker somewhere floating around in Romania. But the being able to set the boundaries and see where the jurisdictions are, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I enjoy the fact that that I can work in both spaces. Unfortunately, not at, unfortunately, the positions or the systems they don't see the value of that yet. It's sort of like we're still hitting frameworks rather
Right.
than regulatory components. So but that'll come on. There'll be more regulatory addressing later as it comes through.
Beautiful, nice. Now, we have listeners outside of Australia as well. I'm going to talk about the Essential 8. So for our listeners outside Australia, you're constantly working on the Essential 8 framework, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So could you go into what is the Essential 8 and what's the hardest part about actually implementing it in a complex, perhaps legacy environment?
Okay, so the Essential 8 comes from Australia's ISM, which is the Information Security Manual. All right, and the Information Security Manual is managed by ASD or ACSC, and every quarter they bring out an updated version of this security manual. Now, the things that they focus on particular categories. So, for example, gateways or networks or things along those lines. And then what they do is they then break that down and place in security controls that relate to gateways. So this is what we expect of you. Now, what the Essential 8 does, the Essential 8 categorizes that into a more digestible system. So you can imagine if you've just got a whole Excel spreadsheet of, 2,500, 3,000 controls that you're going, oh yeah, I meet that. You'll be doing that every quarter and you'll see the updates and you just go, oh geez, what's going on here, right? So drive you nuts. So what they did with the Essential 8 is they said, right, these are the Essential 8 criteria, right? So things like backup, things like standard operating systems, in terms of security of your operating system, those sorts of things. So they're broken up into 8 essential categories. And what they did with that is in each category, they then said, these are the core security controls that you need to have to meet that category. The reason why they came up with that is so that the normal Joe Blow that wants to reasonably meet in their small business, reasonably meet security, can have something which they can actually digest and actually request either their IT partner to do, or as in the case in some small businesses, they do themselves. It comes back to the fact that in law we have a reasonable test, right? And the reasonable test is saying, and it's this sliding scale. It's always sliding scale. When they say it's reasonable, it's a sliding scale of reasonableness. So that's why that's always tested in law, right? So with the reasonable test, it is that a person or an organisation in dealing with business have done all reasonable steps to make sure that they provide a secure system, right? Now, reasonable is, as I'm saying, is a sliding scale, but that's basically where that comes from to enable us to, or to enable the government of Australia to provide something for everyone that people can really look at and come back and implement. Now, there's a whole heap of training on the Essential 8, but in short, the Essential 8 is really quite consumable and edible for the normal person and the normal organisation. So that's why they would come back and they'll say, look, I want to make sure that I meet the Essential 8. Now, the next part of that is maturity. All right. So yes, just I've got a backup system. Is it secure? Does it is it stored securely? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So underneath,
are you just backing up your ransomware?
Maturity. That's exactly right. So then they have the maturity model. So then they have 3 layers of maturity. So then you can say, well, I want to meet Essential 8 maturity 2 across all of Essential 8. So therefore, you have to meet and the items at level 2. Yes, do you have to document it? Do you have to make sure things that are right? Yes, you have to do those sorts of things. But there are resources that are available on the ACSC website that enable us to consume that quite well.
Yeah, nice, nice. You when you mentioned an Excel spreadsheet with thousands of controls, I got some nervous flashes to NIST. NIST is a bit more
Oh,
like
yeah,
that,
it's
right?
mental.
It scares
Yeah,
me.
mental. Yeah, yeah.
Is there something in behind the Essential Eight that is like similar to NIST, where they've taken a NIST and gone like, let's distill this down into these kind of controls? Like, is there the scary version, like the Essential 800, or
No, no, no. Essential 8 is really for consumables.
yeah, yeah,
ISM, when you really put all of these together, they're sort of like regurgitating the same but different.
yeah,
When you've got the NIST and you've got the OSINT and you've got all these other things as well, right? And then you've got the really advanced legal framework that the Europe that's over in Europe,
mm,
right? Then you've got to start marrying all those together. So then what happens with that is that legal framework now starts to dictate these other frameworks, right? Because we now need to make sure that this framework is European compliant, right?
mm,
GDPR and all those sorts of things compliant. The biggest one being, they've been the ones that have been the forefront with AI, and all the legal AI. This is what you can do. This is what you can't do. End of story. They've actually sort of, stipulated that, which is fantastic. But and whereas we in Australia have got, um, you know, ethics and 10 dot points of how we should be implementing AI, right? Which
yeah.
is just, please have a look. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah,
Yeah.
it scares me all the different laws. We might have to have a conversation after this. I'm trying to launch a platform at the moment in 51 different countries and multiple legislations and your data centers in different areas and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm just it's an interesting kettle of fish that I'm
It
just
is.
starting to dip my toes into. So it's I'm glad there's people like you that exist. Put it that way. So you've sat on both sides of the table. So where do you think the dialogue most often breaks down? Where is it most a danger of breaking down between the legal team drafting things like privacy policy or keeping people honest against the privacy policy that already exists and the engineering team that has to implement it? Like I find myself as an engineer at heart wanting to just go, go, go. And then I have a note from my legal department that says, did you think about this? And I will say, well, I'm not going to say I ignored it, but so how does that work between those two teams? What's the most efficient way? This is a selfish question as
Okay.
much as anything
Yeah,
for the listeners.
I come back to my previous point that they have the value of having the legal insight has not quite uh, is not recognised at this present point, right? And that you've just highlighted a fantastic point with that, right? So I can, with great confidence, because of my study with privacy, especially in Australian privacy and European privacy, I can, with great confidence, design a privacy by design system, right?
Mm,
Whereas other engineers can't. They'll do a design and they'll go ahead and pump through exactly what you said. Now that getting those teams involved early is very important. Right at the design and planning stage,
mm,
to be able to just, even if it's just inform or run some workshops or whatever it might be. I'm forever within my various teams, forever just highlighting things for them to consider with regards to how data is transmitted, how data is stored, how data is viewed, etc., so on and so forth. All right, so and just keeping them honest in terms of that way. But earlier the better. Privacy by design, security by design. They're not new concepts.
no.
It's just the fact that it's just the fact that people think that, we have to get a privacy impact assessment or privacy threat assessment or whatever done. We'll just wait until we finish it, and in some cases, it's just, it's some cases it's too far gone.
Yeah.
In other cases, it's okay. But doing also the doing a document that is consumable by the legal team to be able to perform their privacy, whatever it might be, privacy assessment is important, because some legal people are not technical
Yeah.
in any way, shape, or form. So you might have to not dumb it down, but sanitize it a little bit to say this is basically what we want to do. So in most cases, I'll tell the story through the flow, so I can actually say this is what is happening at each of these steps and each of these interface points and each of the transmission points. But the other one where I think there is a big disconnect is in contract negotiations. Now I know it goes back and forth and etc. Right, so I know, especially on big contracts, it goes back. In some cases, it can be a year or more for that contract to hit. Now in IT, a year is a long time, so when you're dealing with those sorts of things, contract formation and contract execution needs to really align and really be practical in terms of the evolution of our platforms. Right? If we're going on to Google or we're going on to AWS or Azure, their platform evolves consistently. Right? So our contracts need to make sure that we can actually do that and utilize what we to be able to utilize. It does come back to, in some cases, people jumping up and down and doing the Kermit the Frog sort of thing, going, "No, I can't do this." And so, but yeah, contract formation, getting lawyers and those sorts of teams involved. Same with security, get them involved early and get them to understand what the authorization plan or the security plan is going to be for it. And those sorts of things don't have to be really huge and time consuming. It's just an awareness project so everyone can have their 10 cents worth.
I'm hearing more and more, and it's great to hear that we need to consider security early. Like you're building an app fundamentally, or a system fundamentally, security has to be not an afterthought. Like we've heard that more and more over the last X amount of years. I've not heard before like what you're talking about specifically in terms of bringing privacy in and bringing in legal teams and all that kind of stuff in early too. But it makes as much sense as bringing in the security team in the beginning. It's interesting how recently this is things that I'm experiencing. So it's good to hear. It's good to hear. Hopefully, I'm doing it as well as you just described.
My example is for this specifically is when you're talking about Bitcoin or non-fungible token NFTs or something along those lines, right? When you're talking about those sorts of things, right? We are talking a regulated environment to a point. Right, so it's still in Australia. We're not fully regulated with that there, but it is being overseen. But you need legal right from day dot. Right, we're dealing with finance, we're dealing with so on and so forth. So that's the example that I provide, and I say to them, well, then if you do that with financial, then why not do it with other areres? All right, so and just make it consistent. Now, obviously, that's not going to be viable for everyone and every. I'm not saying everyone, but I think that's where some of the legal strategies and some of the legal provision of advice can be more broad and maybe more consistent with a workshop approach. Please enroll in the workshop because if you want to design an app or whatever, I can lay down some things, some fundamentals that you need to consider. So those sorts of things need to be, people need to be more aware of it. But yeah, so I think that there are lots of ways in which legal teams and lawyers can get their message across. It's just getting it out there and making sure that the general punter, so to speak, can get their ear in. Because it's going to be one a person in the backyard comes up with the next app, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
And
100%.
so we're not talking big business here, but we're talking the availability of saying, hey, look, you need to go through and have a look at that and create that that dynamic.
Not everyone has like the amount of people who've come up and said, "Hey, I have an idea for a new app." Not
Yeah.
very few people have a team of dedicated legal minds to help them with that. Is there like an essential 8 for making sure that you have all your legal requirements done or anything like that in Australia or elsewhere? Or
Look, no, not really.
yeah, I
But look,
thought that could be the answer.
but it depends upon the style of it, right? So,
Mm,
for example, if you're creating a drone or something along those lines, right? You've got hardware and so on and so forth that you're putting into that, right? So you might use, just a normal drone that you've come up, but you're doing some modification to it. So there's certain things that are going to affect you right there straight away with regards to maybe the cybersecurity suite that was introduced. Now, the cybersecurity suite is, cyber introduced this time last year, but was enacted in December last year. Um, so it's quite new, and if there's a bit of a grace period that's come in for people, but those sorts of things, right? And this is what people are creating now. I see endlessly with people, doing fantastic things with drones, being able to modify the camera for heat signature, being able to do all those sorts of things. So it actually does those sorts of things. That's just off the bat. You can imagine what governments and all those sorts of things are doing just with normal, small drones,
yeah.
Um, so those sorts of things. And then they expect people working on other larger aspects. But look, there isn't, and I'd love it if there was a place that we can go to. So I've sort of been working on a few things with regards to that, just to make it more palatable for people, and so people can navigate that world a little bit easier.
Yeah, because like when you started talking about drones, I didn't even think like hardware, and then the new laws for hardware, like what's your radio frequency like
Yeah.
allotment and how much you're allowed to emit, and all, like you couldn't put that in an essential 8. Like, does your
No.
app involve? I mean, maybe you could. I don't know. Although also when you mentioned drones, I just thought about the Vivid
Oh,
in Sydney.
that's what I was just about to say. Yeah.
the half of them are sitting at the bottom of the harbour now. I hope that wasn't just someone with like a hack RF, just like I don't know.
Those things you can buy them off Amazon, right?
Yeah,
Totally illegal, right?
yeah.
Totally
Well,
illegal.
yeah. That's it.
But you can buy them off Amazon, and
Yeah,
that's where that security component comes in, being able
yeah.
to securely transmit from point A to point B. Yeah, look, you're going to have some higher encrypted RF signals to be harder to interfere with.
Yeah, you'd have to hope that those drones have that. So for anyone who hasn't seen, at Vivid, the light show in Sydney last night, I believe it was last night, there was a drone show and half the drones fell into the water, half like just flew away. It doesn't, yeah, it's less than ideal. You'd think there'd be some like frequency hopping or like a return to home or something like that, but they just appeared to like, just, yeah. Maybe Drone Shield was, practicing with a new something. I'm sure they weren't. I'm sure they weren't. Gosh.
But
Wow.
it does sound like there's something suspect, doesn't it?
There was, yeah, something dodgy. Not, yeah. I was thinking now, if I go and watch it, it might be interesting to have a spectrum analyzer up and see what's happening around the drones. But I wouldn't want to be the one holding a hack RF next to a drone show. Put it that way.
No.
Yeah, funny. So you've spent a bit of time in technology. I hope you don't mind me saying. What is one widely held belief that you had about security or IT that you have since changed your mind about?
Oh, nice one.
Actually, I'm sorry. We are nearly on time. So I don't think we actually have time to wrap it all up and answer that question. So what this means? We have to have you in again at some point. It's been wonderful. It's been wonderful chatting with you. I wish we had way more time, but we're coming right up to the end, and so got to let people get back to their business. For everyone on the call, I really appreciate you spending the time with us. Hopefully you had as much fun as I definitely did. I appreciate you logging on in. And Gerard, I appreciate you taking the time to educate us all today. I'm definitely looking for a part 2 of this. So thanks very much for taking the time today.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Bye.